When customers come into the Bell branch, I would like them to know that it's not just a place they can do their banking. They can come laugh with us, cry with us, pray with us. We want to be their friend, not just their bankers. My name is Courtney Frazier, and I'm the Bell branch manager. Happy Banking is different because our level of customer service that we offer to our customers and the personal relationships that we develop with our customers.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, Ellen.
Hello. Yeah.
Oh, Alan.
Ellen.
All right, you all, we called it to order, so that's good. That's right.
We'll begin such seriousness with the consideration of the minutes of last week's meeting.
I checked them. Three of us did good.
Yes, we went three of us. That's what we catch.
We're going to have quite a bit of the discussion in work session today is the Kelly Shaw show. Start with item number 2, ordinance 7396. This is a rezoning out of Bell Street to Hyde Parkway, an existing planned development that's being amended. Joe?
It's an office complex, basically under one roof, a fairly large office complex. It's a planned development now. It was done with Planned Development District 269. The request is they're wanting to expand their existing building by about 5,000 square feet. In order to do so, since this was one of the planned developments that was done by site plan as well, we required a planned development amendment. Basically, this is just south of Bell Street and south on Bell Street, just south of Hillside. It's on the west side of the street. They're proposing to add about 5,180 square feet of office space. And then along with that is some additional parking. They're actually providing more parking than would be required. But all the expansion of the office building and the parking requirement would be located towards the rear of the property. They are planning on adding employees, and so basically this was just to maintain the development standards that were enacted originally to help mitigate any negative impacts on the residential neighborhood that's both to the north and to the west. And the proposed development standards that would be associated with this amendment, the land use would be exactly the same, building height would be exactly the same, lot coverage increased just by about 3%. But on your staff report, you can see the minimum setbacks. They're still maintaining that setback, which are substantial, that being 170 feet to the west and 75 feet to the north, so some significant setbacks on the building. So the addition of the building really wouldn't really have any noticeable impact at all. The building material would have to match the existing building. The landscaping, they're proposing to add almost twice as many trees that are there, and the bulk of those are going to be between the west property line, the rear property line, and the new residences. They're providing quite a bit more parking spaces, as I had mentioned earlier. Hours of operation will be the same. Quite a few more employees, from 40 to 220 is what's being proposed. Signage would remain the same. The lighting would remain the same, except for specifically mentioning that any of those light poles that go into that rear parking area that's being expanded all have to be of a recessed nature, where you don't have the bulb that has the bleed out over the property line. Screening would be the same. So really, Planning and Zoning Commissioners felt that with the proposed development standards, along with what was already approved in the first plan development, that the expansion would not create any negative impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. They recommended unanimously to approve it, and so at the time of this writing, and also this was true before the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, we only had one comment, and that was from a letter from property owner that lives directly to the west. And it's actually the first time I can remember it happening, but he actually sent in a letter saying that he supported the request because they had been excellent neighbors, and anything that they wanted to do.
Is this just miscellaneous offices?
No, it's Ward McCoy and Company, they changed the name.
Sure,
It's a
yeah.
red top.
Right.
They're good neighbors, and it's always maintained perfectly.
Yeah, red metal roof. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
Okay.
great neighbors.
But we don't get those kind of letters very often when it's from a resident about an adjacent non-resident.
Do they own that empty land that Sarn Farms, kind of a triangle coming out north? It's right adjacent, it comes up against the fence. It doesn't
I
matter.
can't say if they do or not off the top of my head.
That's not a good project.
There's kind of, looks like there's kind of an undeveloped flag lot
Yeah.
to the south of them.
So definitely
These people are just good.
Oh, no, they don't. That's the, that was owned by, his name just left me, but, owns the, storage buildings. They had done a plan development, Paul Fields. It's owned by Paul Fields, or it used to be. He's owned that for, mini storage warehouses and all that. It never came to fruition.
Moving from 40 employees to 220.
They go all over the country, so.
They do a lot of processing for banks.
That may not all happen at once, but they're saying they're planning up to 240, or not that many, 220 employees.
Anybody got any questions?
Project.
Well planned.
Okay, next item, ordinance 7397. This is a rezoning out in the Greenways area. New residential coming online. Coach?
This rezoning is, again, when, undeveloped property, usually when it's annexed, it's automatically zoned agriculture until it gets developed. This is some of the remainder tracts associated with the Greenways annexation and development. They're requesting to change the zoning from agricultural district to moderate density district, moderate agricultural district and moderate density district to residential district 3 and residential district 1. So there's a lot of rezoning going on, but basically it's to be able to continue the expansion of their residential subdivision. And if you look at the sketch, I'll explain this the best I can. Their original design, they had requested they were going to do some small garden home lots south and adjacent to Pine Ridge Drive. And so if you see that little right-of-way area that's brown there in the middle, that whole kind of strip along Pine Ridge is currently zoned moderate density district, with the rest of that south being agricultural district. So those are the two present zonings that they're requesting to change, and then you can see where they're proposing their larger lot, residential district 1, and then to the west, the smaller lot, residential district 3. The reason
Where is that bird sanctuary big playa that they did?
It's here.
Down here?
down there to the
Okay.
south.
Okay.
The white traces that path that was put in.
Right, okay.
Right.
Excuse me.
You may wonder about that strip in between. They actually did the meets and bounds to reflect the actual property that's being zoned, and we don't have that happen a lot. But the way our ordinance reads, once this gets rezoned, and then once the property's platted, because the property hadn't actually been platted yet, you can see the kind of the proposed plat superimposed on that zoning. But once they do the plat, this particular strip, the zoning will actually, we have the way our zoning ordinance reads, the zoning is extended into the right-of-way to the center line, so it ought to, once it's platted, that zoning will automatically extend to the center line on each side.
Is that green strip through there, the zigzag, is that a street?
That's a street.
Is Landon gonna come through from the side all the way down?
I'm sorry?
Is Landon gonna come through, or is there a barrier there? it's got that kind of Y deal in there.
Landings to the north.
Right, that's going to be a little entryway median will
Okay.
feature. It's part of the public improvement district.
Okay.
But they've included the right of way and as part of the parcels that you see zoning, but they left that right of way out to separate the two zonings, and that's the way they described it by meets and bounds. But I just wanted to let you know, I don't mean to confuse you, but once that's actually platted, that zoning will automatically extend to the center line of that street so that you don't have a strip of unzoned, technically called.
Why proposed R3, proposed R1? Why not all under proposed R1?
They wanted to do a little smaller lot in the R3.
And then the commercial that backs up there on the west side of that is on Sonsi. That's all currently agricultural, but they anticipate that that's going to be general retail.
And that's one of those things that if you read our staff report, it's one of the things we kind of mentioned that the areas of the Greenways subdivision that have been developed already really do conform to the neighborhood unit concept where you have the non-residential zoning and development on the corners of the intersections of the arterials, and then residential in between along the arterial, and then interior also. One of the first things we asked about, when you see a zoning request like this and you notice that strip out there to the west, well, what are you going to do with that? And if this was on any other arterial, we'd be concerned about that and would like to talk to them about that. But this being Sonsi, with that already being kind of identified as one of our major commercial corridors, Route 335, that's what that strip is being left for, is potentially non-residential development. We get this more and more from developers or property owners that they want to leave that strip, but there's reasons why we discourage that strip unless you're on a commercial corridor like that. And also, the last APA conference that I went to, they said that this is beginning to come around again and be a problem, is that strict retail zoning or strict commercial zoning that most cities, if they take a look at it as far as property zoned for and what the demand is, that most cities are way over zoned for commercial development and the actual demand. And so they kind of recommend that you really take a look at that kind of strip zoning and determine if that's in the best interest of the city.
Because the Greenway seem to be surrounded, if you take from CVC all the way west to where the houses start, CVS Pharmacy from the Cornhill side or Coulter, go all the way west, there's a big open area there now, a big area where the state is, now this area. Are we going to have residents come back and say, well, is that going to be business, office, or apartments?
And what are they being told as they start to buy the lot?
Well, this is a little unique in that in CVS, then you have that big open area. But then you have residential, and then you have the school, which you see here. That big open area was platted as a park. And therein presents a real problem, because if it's platted as a park by state law, it has to stay a park unless everybody that's a property owner that owns property within that first plat that platted it, everybody has to agree that can be rezoned.
Not a 50-50 deal, it's 100%.
That board has to go to a vote.
Is that there by the town club? Is that what you're talking about?
South
Across the street.
It's a big area. I mean, it looks to me like it's...
They originally platted it for soccer fields and some things like that, but the more it's been developed, they think they have enough greenway area, and they would like to develop that with something. But I've talked to Eddie Scott several times about that, and I said, you're just really stuck. And
But they did it.
They did it, but it's one of those things that we do now with public improvement districts and other plans. If we see something that comes in that says park or recreational area or something like that, we say, are you sure you want to do that, or do you want to call that just a tract or something else? Because if it says park or recreational area or something like that on the plat, then You're stuck with it unless everybody that owns property that was represented on that plat, which on Eddie Scott's, the first Greenways plat, 200 lots, something like that, and every single one of them would have to sign off on it, and I guarantee you that's not.
So, no, it isn't. So that's kind of out of play, but let's ask that same question on A, that unplatted A. Now, I know, I mean, I understand we're still talking here, but A, back up to those, there's really a nice strip, that one in Tuscan, and then there's some smaller homes, but they're single-family homes. What could go in A?
Well, it would, right now, it's just a reserved area land, but if anybody called and told us, we said that that's probably going to be a commercial type zoning and development.
Commercial could be business office, it could be
Shopping center.
and it could be apartments.
And plus, he's got a big sign out there that says commercial. I think it says
Yes.
commercial, land for commercial settlement.
It sounds like you're somewhat aggressive, but what are we doing in the future to identify what we said in the comprehensive plan and not leave any surprises in these things for people, residents?
I think that's where we're at right here today.
I know, but let's go a step further. What should we do next?
Well, on something like this, you always have the ability to zone it. The city can initiate zoning, like we kind of talked about a couple of weeks ago. We can initiate the zoning, but, you know, we had neighborhood services zoning, we had general retail zoning, we had light commercial zoning. So, depending on how you want, this leaves much more flexibility for the property owner. But if somebody wanted to come in and rezone this industrial or heavy commercial or something like that, it's incumbent upon staff to say, no, we're not going to recommend that because we try to adhere to the neighborhood unit concept, and here's what we would recommend. You have the right to request it, but we're going to recommend denial of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And, and then if they deny it, they can appeal it, and our staff report would be the same to you, that it doesn't conform to the comprehensive plan.
But our battles have been with people that felt they were shocked or misled, even though they may not have done their homework. And that's going to happen. My question is, what do you do? Now, in my mind, that park area you talked about a minute ago, forget it. It's their problem. They created it. That's their problem. They got to get 100% signatures. But I don't want to keep creating things like that down the road where residents don't expect. And I understand we're worried about the property owner, but I'm also worried about every one of those residents. If I built a house in there, I'd want somebody worried about what's happening around here. I really think we should get it.
Just another viewpoint on that, Mayor. You've also got the matter of the developer's rights. It's his land, and if he can make the case that it's suitable to be zoned for offices versus light commercial, that's probably an equal consideration that the commission may want to balance. It's not just those people who bought land. They were told whatever they were told by third parties we don't control. But to maintain the rights of the developer to maximize his profit or her profit. And there's also an interesting little point of law that doesn't get talked about much. You mentioned the comprehensive plan. Every time you amend, I'm using this as an example, when you amend a rezoning request, the effect of that is it amends your comprehensive plan. That's in some court cases coming out of the Texas Local Government Code. But that's just a technical detail, but you have your comprehensive plan saying we think in the future this will be high density. Well, you come back today and you say times have changed, traffic patterns have changed, things Kelly's going to talk about, changes in the neighborhood. You say, well, maybe today we're going to change it from high density to just R1, R3. And that has the effect of amending, in a sense, your comprehensive plan. The challenge for Kelly, and I'll shut up, is to try to guide y'all, encourage good decisions that don't become a patchwork, but still somewhat a comprehensive view of
Continuity.
Yes, sir.
Well, these were platted and figured a long time ago. We don't know what happened with those homeowners. My thought's going more to what our next phases of expansion are. Should we, on corners and on sides, have the developer give us a very specific use so that the owners, the landowners, the homeowners around there got to have a better idea of what's going on. We saw the ire created in the community when we were left with very little choice. Should we define those choices better and have the developer, or is that going too far as a commission?
I think it's
No, go ahead.
Great discussion.
It's a very important discussion. It's a good discussion. If we go back to some of those earlier talks on the pyramid of the zoning, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to ever ensure that all of the people who buy lots or buy homes are as fully informed as maybe we'd like them to be as to what would happen on those undeveloped properties. The current protection that we have for them today, as Kelly's talked about and what the comprehensive plan has talked about, neighborhood unit concept puts the more intensive uses in the corners first, and then on the exteriors, and then becomes higher and better uses as you move toward the interior. Leaving that zoned as agriculture guarantees that anything that they wish to do out there to change the use of that property from today's nothing towards anything, at the very minimum, is going to go through the full planning and zoning commission process and then ultimately the city commission process. So those owners are certainly going to receive more notice and more opportunity to participate in the zoning. Does it stop some of what we've faced over the years? No, it won't stop at all. I think anything that we tried to preordain out there, we've got the most restrictive zoning that we can get today. Exactly.
And anything that you preordain, the next city commission can see the world differently. It gets to be to an eye of the beholder type of thing too. Do you prefer offices? You prefer light retail? It gets to be a matter of judgment.
Well, in the last big battle we had, some of us couldn't believe they wanted retail there versus apartments. And yet that was the homeowner's choice. I would not have predicted that.
Well, yeah, the developer may not know when he might be able to track to come on that property, and it could be one or the other. While we may say you can only put retail there, if you want to put an apartment there, then we're telling him he can't use that land for the purpose that he just wants to sell the land for. He doesn't really care what's on there.
Gets back to caveat emptor.
Exactly.
Yeah, your imprimatur will last as long as this majority is in office.
Yeah.
Is the only thing you can be assured of.
You know, we've had, some of us have had quite a few discussions with developers. I know we're going to talk about this more today, but, you know, their feeling was that, well, when we originally brought, just in future reference, when we originally bring this section to you, and we say to you what we want to do with this section, it gives you a long-term ability to plan what your infrastructure needs to be. And so that means they're going to need to give you a master plan for that whole new development up front. But the problem is now when we're still piecemealing it based on what we've done before, we're exactly reproducing the same kind of problems that we've all agreed we don't want to do anymore. So now are we going to have to continue on with a development that's already begun the process and continue to recreate the same problems, or at what point, you know, at what point are we going to actually inspissate ourselves into that process? Because the next big development, Redstone, for example, if we're going to lay down the law on that one, we're talking about things that aren't going to occur for 15 years.
Well, it's, I think what Marcus points out that stops you is the next commission. But I think one of the things that could happen to be positive is carry on those discussions with developers and obviously Kelly's office and Scott's office and us sit down and on a more regular basis and figure out, okay, well, here's what we're running into problems with. Just have them sort through it and think about it. Make them commit up front voluntarily, because that's kind of what they said to us. We don't know what you're going to do with the southeast loop, but we can't develop it right. We can't tell people what's going to, we can't sell up to the edge of the property because we don't know what right-of-way is going to be needed. So I think we got to just carry on the conversations.
On the point of the preliminary plat that you mentioned, that is a conceptual snapshot of what I see the entirety of this piece of property be, that full section or whatever it happens to be.
Once fully developed sometime down the road.
Exactly. That'll specifically get discussed in part 2 of our discussion that we're going to have today. That'll be next week. It is something that all of us have talked to the different developers about. You'll get a pretty wide range of opinions as to whether they want to do that or they don't.
If we don't sit down with them, Brian, where we're trying to second guess this, across the street's another developer. And we try to do something with this guy, and we go to the guy across the street with competing ventures, and we said, whoops, we favored one versus the other. So it really is a
Winners and losers.
complex. Yeah, we don't want to do that either.
And that's the demand on your infrastructure in areas to where you don't have new capacity that's not being used today often becomes that question of, well, okay, I'm asking first. I have a buyer for the corner's going to be an X. Can you get there? Well, yeah, maybe we can, but then what happened to the opposite corner that didn't get their piece of that put in place quite as quickly? All of that's going to wrap into some of these other discussions that goes into your subdivision policies, your planning and zoning, your comp plan. It's a huge topic, and it's important. I mean, it's the orderly development and support of your community.
If we have a role in that, though, I think this commission's ready to take on that role. If we don't have a role, we need to be told we don't. But
you have a role, and that's where we're going to get us to in the next 2, maybe 3 weeks, depending on our discussions. It'll come back eventually, like your annexation policy did. What we want to try to do, and I'm a little out the line, just as we did with zoning, build that base of how these things work in general, then we get into specifics of how it's done today, what the comp plan has suggested you consider. We then need your thoughts and advice so your comp plan committee can get started on that. It's a big, daunting topic, but it'll start coming back for action. It'll be good.
This would be where you can really make an impact on that. Is, for example, on this, if we really start encouraging master plan developments to be submitted and approved, which Greenways did. They submitted a master plan for the entire section, and it's to give you a conceptual idea of what the development's going to be like. And then you can amend it as you go through the process. But on this, they showed non-residential development on these corners, and if you wanted to at that time, when they start zoning something, we could, if you wanted to go that far, we could say, well, we would prefer you to go ahead and do some zoning, sort of like placeholders. If this is what you say your conceptual.
Doesn't mean we couldn't change it, just like the other commissions couldn't.
But sort of the only problem I can see with that is this just allows more flexibility. If you want to say, well, neighborhood unit concept, let's put general retail zoning here as a placeholder, and then something comes along that doesn't quite fit in general retail, but it does in light commercial, then they'll want to change their zoning, but if there's residents there, then they're going to throw a fit, and it's already zoned general retail. I mean, the flexibility almost goes down to
Does it change the taxation if you immediately zone it from agriculture to light commercial or yes?
No, not really.
It's not significant, but it does.
Yeah, it did. If you change from
You can have that zoned agricultural, but you can't get an agricultural exemption unless you're using it for
ag exemption, ag zoning are two different, related but different.
And so your taxation will be based on your evaluation of your improvements and everything, and you can have an undeveloped agricultural piece of land, and you can have an undeveloped retail zone.
Well, and just one other observation, we've been struggling with continuous left turn lanes and suicide lanes. So if that's going to be left with somebody for an eye for retail, then when we get ready to want to put limited left turn lanes on Sonsi, there's going to be an impact from that. If there's going to be potential businesses there, nobody's going to want that to do anything but a big fat suicide lane all the way down the middle lane. So here we go, off the races.
And we haven't done that to rest the city comprehensively, so it becomes why are you changing? You're favoring somebody, and that's the arguments we heard, is you're favoring an area that can turn easily, access wherever they want, and you're hurting my area. It's important you get ahead of these. We just don't know how you get ahead of it.
Yeah, it's working so well right now.
About 100 years ago, some of this should have been discussed.
we just have
I can tell you how you get ahead of it.
a place to start and start doing it.
Is there a comprehensive plan or update more than 15, 20 years apart?
Well, let's have at it, because I think that's what we're seeing. It's just complicated.
You can do streets like in San Antonio where if you're going to turn, you have to stop at a light and then.
But you should hear the developers talk.
I think the people buying the land have some right, though, to know what's going to happen behind them.
Oh,
Well,
But
here
they do.
again, they should be aware of what
could have
possibly
it.
can have it, yeah.
Yeah.
But most of them
Remember
don't.
back
Sorry,
to-
there's no vested interest in zoning.
That's exactly it. You don't have a vested interest in zoning. Either
Or your
you as
neighbor's
the
land.
adjacent owner, or you the property owner. That's subject to change. The protection for both properties is the process by which zoning can be changed. So back to, if you leave those corners as an agricultural zone, anything that they want to do beyond an agricultural use has to come back and go through the entirety of the process. Notification, public hearings, etc. If we put a general retail zone on as a placeholder, there are numerous activities that can occur within that general retail area without ever coming back, some of which would be very agreeable, some of which would likely come up. You can build apartments in general retail.
Bars,
Tattoo parlors.
tattoo parlors.
Auto
I don't
shops.
think tattoo parlors go there.
I don't think so.
No, there's a few.
So,
Don't ever buy land with vacant.
Well, and seriously, you kind of have to, if you're buying a piece of property with vacant land behind you, you kind of need to call and say, well, what can they do behind me if I buy this house? And even though we said it was agricultural zone, if somebody called and asked about that right there, we would show them the master plan that was approved. We would show them what our comprehensive plan recommends, and we would give them probably the options. Here's probably what's going to happen.
And that's
Some
sort of,
point.
that's sort of what happened in our big ballyhoo in the colonies, is we couldn't stop what was going to naturally happen, any way the developer chose.
I think those property owners that are adjacent to that apartment complex, in my opinion, are fortunate that that apartment complex had to go through the process that it did.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm not sure that I
remember,
just think it was good that they got that process.
had that PD been worded just slightly different, it was an odd one. If it had been worded just slightly different, that apartment complex would have gone in without ever having back through the process.
No masonry discussion, no
Setbacks.
driveways, no windows.
Windows, which way do they
Yeah.
face? I mean, but because of how that, in hindsight, had that never been part of the PD and that as agricultural, you would have had the entirety of the process start to finish.
Yeah.
Were it not for that one
Okay.
piece. Okay. Good discussion. Item 4, ordinance 7398, also a zoning change, also certain residential development, this time out in Hillside Terrace.
Same, a similar type of zoning request to expand the residential development in the Hillside Terrace Estate subdivision. The proposed zoning change would be from agricultural district to residential district 2. It's a lot density that's in between the R3 and the R1, 6,000 square foot area. It's just expands the similar development and zoning that already exists within the subdivision. Planning and Zoning Commission had no problems with it and recommended the request unanimously. And just to get this in here real quick, I hope you noticed in your staff reports, because we've been trying to do this now. We try to mention in each zoning request how it ties to the comprehensive plan in some form or fashion. So we're trying to get that part turned around as well.
Good.
Questions or comments on item number 4?
So that's not platted yet, so you don't know if it'll be R2 or R1 or what?
Right, because technically it's zoned agricultural right now, where the lots have to be an acre. So we try to get the zoning done before that. We have plats pending on both of those, pending the zoning change.
Okay.
It's like the developers are on march.
So it was already platted, it would be technically in violation of the zoning. I'm not saying that hadn't happened. We try to avoid it.
Questions on that one?
No?
Moving on to the consent agenda. Consent item A is the annual purchase of rock salt. The price of that has gone up. We did have more bidders than we typically get.
Gosh, no joke.
There's a big spread.
There is a big spread. You know, we rarely put out straight rock salt. It's mixed with sand before it goes out. We use actually very little of it compared to the.
What's the stuff some cities use that turns kind of purple on your windshield? Some kind of.
Is that the magnesium chloride?
Is that up over here? I just wonder why they do.
There's a liquid de-icer that goes out as a slurry. There's a different one that's occasionally applied even in Amarillo on the bridges and the overpasses that goes down first. It's supposed to keep it from ever forming. I'm not aware that either of those is used very extensively here.
Okay.
We do have a liquid that goes down on the runways at the airport, but it's a completely different product.
Some filters and stuff, tons of pages.
Well, jumping into item B then, automotive filters, annual supply agreement, many of those.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
It's one of them standard filters.
Oh, if we ever had all of our stuff the same, it'd be quite a bit simpler to do. Item C is the request for approval on the sheriff's sale of properties. These are Potter County, so sold by the Potter County SO and within the city of Amarillo. You see the list. Some of these,
That's a couple of shocks on
this time, were better bids than we see on a lot of bids.
What happened if we said no? We have approved, but it's already sold, right?
Well,
I don't.
that's to ask Marcus. It would be my understanding that the sale would stop and none of the jurisdictions would get anything. The money comes back pro rata. So, school
Why in the
district,
world do we have approved? Because of our taxes?
state law, you have a tax levy on it, or tax lien on
And Jared, we did review this list and counted to make sure none of them owed us any tax for that.
it. Remember, we asked this commission to change that about a year and a half ago. It's been very successful in getting people to pay up.
Why would it bid before that property? Why would it?
Is the Portwood one on the notice one?
No, there were, I don't think there were.
There were two. One on,
I think when our time to submit the money,
The surety.
maybe one reason this comes to mind, off the head, it could be something else.
just running well.
Where's that example?
Page. Well,
Just looking, I saw
I
them.
don't really want to see it. There's the bottom of the second line, well,
4 or 5, 5 or 5, 3 or 5.
3 of 5, top of 3 of 5, and top of 2 of 5. Middle of 2 of 5.
See that one?
Yeah.
But it was a high bid.
Well, he may have withdrawn it as well.
I was looking to see if perhaps it would, if it was a hypothetically corporation and made the bid, but then they don't have their corporate charter and everything in order, then that would be a ground. But that looks like an individual.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus is the one that forfeited the bid,
That's right.
not the award.
That's correct. He was,
Like these old houses, they're not lost.
Properties.
They're mixed and matched. We
If you see down below,
properties that we've cleaned.
On the one below, he got the bid and somebody else worked. I wonder if they worked out. They did. You see that? The two names are opposite on the two forfeits. One withdrew and let the other guy have it, and the other guy withdrew and let the other guy have it. See that?
No, I don't see the second
We'll
one.
see the Fuentes and Armendariz, and then on the other one, it's the opposite. Armendariz got it, Fuentes, so they colluded on their bid. That's illegal too.
Be careful what you accuse me
I
of.
will. Just all suggestions.
It could be perhaps, but maybe not.
Coincidence.
Jock
Hopefully it'll
fixed
become the
the
landlords.
bids in here for $1.26.
Yeah.
$7.50.
Well, you can try.
You never know. Never know.
A lot of people
Buy a lot that way.
That's what I'm trying to finesse.
pay the tax.
Okay.
Okay, we're learning all kinds of this stuff.
Yeah.
Quite a few of them on the list. We haven't had a list going that long in quite a while. Usually come
Well,
over
it's amazing how
4 or
much we're
5.
recovering against
Some of
what's
them.
it's owed.
Well, that's taxes only. Some of those will have city liens on them. Of course, we won't sell them to the successful bidder.
$6,000.
So once you buy, you have to pay the taxes?
No, that's what you're paying.
Oh, that's it?
You get it, fees in.
All right.
Like a 3-year redemption period in Texas law or something?
No, it's not that long. I think it's 6 months on the
6
term.
months.
I think it's longer than private mortgage.
People used to try to come in and borrow money on sales of property on the courthouse. I said, gosh, you was a good time. Can't do it, sorry.
I'm just reading the name.
Mean old banker.
It's just in Heights. University
Yeah,
Heights.
University Heights, I know where that is.
It's right next to Highway Park.
Yeah.
In Dallas it is.
Oh, well, yes.
We'll bet
Yeah,
you-
Fremont.
We'll bet that's the neighborhood just south of City.
Park Cities, Park Cities.
And those are plat names, not necessarily neighborhood.
Okay.
Okay, everybody good on that one?
Yep.
Well, there are 2 things then left for the work session today. First, we'll get Kelly back up here and start on the presentation that we briefly mentioned on the city's development process, who does what, when. This is a multi-part deal. We'll start today just to really kind of at a high level of what's the theory of this, just like we did with zoning. Next week, we'll start drilling into what are the specifics. What it is that's going to happen, how do you make that happen, who does what, at whose expense. So, Kelly, and I think we have handouts.
There's 12.
One more time, please, Jim. And a sample.
Thanks.
Yes. One of the cards?
Yeah.
No, that's a set.
At some point.
They're gonna think we knew this was coming up today.
Okay, take it away.
Aaron was exactly right. We're getting into here very soon. You're going to be hearing about some recommendations on how we might possibly amend our current practices as far as subdivision regulations. And as part of that, we kind of wanted to make sure that when that time comes that you're very comfortable with some of the terminology, some of the thought behind it and that kind of thing. So we were starting today just to give you a big general overview of basically the land development stage. I've got it on here, land development from A to Z, and basically we're talking about annexation to zoning. And I guess construction really is the final piece of that, but A to C doesn't sound near as snappy as A to Z, so I'll just put A to Z.
I appreciate it.
But if you look at the development timeline, you really do, go from raw land to, subdividing a larger piece of property into smaller pieces and selling those off, and then those at some point start to get developed. But in order to be developed, they have to be zoned properly. And so you go through this sort of timeline on what you need to do. I have a little red check mark here by the annexation because we kind of talked about that part of it, and I think we really have a good focus of where we're headed annexation-wise and what we need to think about. But this is the general timeline that we think about when we're talking about property. As far as annexation, we've already we've been through that policy change. I hope you remember all the reasons for that, but now, since that's been done, when we get a call from somebody about property that's outside in the ETJ, where is it? Where is it in proximity to our growth areas? And would annexation or a developer agreement be a better tool to use, and depending on what we need to do or how it affects our growth or development right outside our city limits? And then how does that, if we annex, how does that affect our utility service? Are we on the clock for utilities, or is there something close by where an extension would be possible? Or are we talking about leapfrogging a section? And so all those things really need to be thought about, and we have a much clearer direction to follow now with the new policy y'all implemented on how to answer those kind of questions. And so we're getting started on that, and has already come into play a couple of times. The next part of that, though, is the subdivision process, and basically that. I want to try to talk a little bit about the actual terminology. And when you hear the word subdivision, literally that means when an owner of a piece of property divides that piece of property, a larger tract, into 2 or more parts, and that comes straight out of state law. And tied to that, which we have a real problem with here around Amarillo, by state law, if a property owner divides a tract into 2 or more parts, it says they must. The word "must" is used. It doesn't say "may." It says you must. Plat the property. And so that's the meaning of a plat. And a plat, and that was my first little page on the handout. That's an example of a plat. It's a graphical depiction of a separation of a larger tract into smaller tracts. And along with that plat, comes any kind of dedication of right-of-ways or anything like that we need. So when you hear the word plat, that's what we're talking about, an actual graphical representation that's prepared by a licensed surveyor that prepares this picture, if you will. And we have certain requirements that they have to have in order to submit the plat. But that's what we're talking about when we're talking plat.
Let me ask one more question. So when they subdivide, do they have to plat that whole subdivision or the whole initial unit?
They can do it however they want to. It's depending on what and there are things that can happen, which I'm going to get into here in just a minute. When we look at a plat, there's things that we look for. But for now, I just wanted you to know what a plat was, because sometimes people, well, what do you mean? I don't even know what a plat is. I bought a piece of property and they gave me a meets and bounds description, and they'll have a little survey of the property. That's not a plat. That's sell a property by meets and bounds description.
So just one other question, so I understand before we get into the details, so I don't get confused. So when they do these different phases, are each one of those considered a subdivision?
Yes.
And that's back to the terminology.
Yeah.
Subdivision, as we're speaking of it in plats, it's the verb, it's to subdivide. Make a big piece into a bunch of small pieces. In common thought, we talk about a subdivision and we mean a neighborhood. Right. Belmar is a subdivision. Right. Well, Belmar is actually comprised of numerous separate plats that together have created the neighborhood out there that you see. Subdivision, often, depending on who's speaking or from what standpoint, gets caught into the 2 traps. All of us have visited with developers and we talk, there's problems with plans or are trying to submit plans. Okay, we'll get into the details of what's a plan and when, and you'll find that there's all different types of plans. They each fit, though, in a different piece of this process. So please keep asking those questions, because when we leave that, we want y'all to have that knowledge and that terminology to pull those things apart and see what they are.
Because whenever they're talking to you, they throw these terms around.
Yeah.
It seems to be a moving target of what they're talking about.
Right.
Exactly.
From your question, here's my question. So a guy owns this big plot here, and there's no, it's all one piece, and he says, well, I'm going to do something with this piece, and I'm going to have somebody else do with this piece. He can exclude all of this, but he has to plat these. Now, even if he just did this as one and puts it in a different corporation name, he's split it into two.
Perfect. If that was 20 acres,
Right.
and he peeled off 2 acres on the corner, he still owns 20 acres, but it's now legally 2 different
Even if he just
pieces of
changes the
property.
corporate name, puts it in an entity to develop it, then he's got to come to you and he's got to plat. How does he not have to plat this? He just has to plat this.
Well, there are exceptions. There are plating exceptions that you can get into.
Okay, but it's possible that he can just, you don't need to get into that now. It's possible that he can exclude this and not
Yes.
plat it, and he can just plat these two, or one. Okay.
And go back to the items on today's agenda. Item number 3, I believe. Greenways. Each of these was platted separately. Now, in the case of Greenways, Eddie had a master plan done that showed you what the basic look of the whole thing would be, and that's good, and they built to it really pretty well. But these are all separate plats.
So the master plan may not be platted, it's just a master
The
plan.
master plan is not a plat.
But if he puts a plat over it, it just doesn't, it's not official.
Right.
Like this, you said there were some,
But Paul's example there, it says plat required when landowner divides a tract into 2 or more parts. Well, that was 3 parts.
well,
But he
even
didn't
if
have
it's
to
two.
plat the
Could've
3rd
been-
part.
That could have been one.
Yes, he does have to plat those two if he says he's gonna do something with them. And he could have just, forget this, he could have just taken this, right? Platted this part and said, I'm gonna exclude this somehow. We don't need to know that.
General rule of thumb, if it's larger than 5 acres, it's exempt from plat. So
Okay.
let's say he had let's say that tract was 5 acres.
Through Texas property
If
law.
that's a 5-acre tract, then he has to plat all 3 lots.
Just like in
Which we would,
Okay, okay.
you see what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
I mean,
Yeah.
if that's 20 acres,
Yeah.
he's still got a big, large tract that's over 5 acres.
Which
So
in a very basic way answers some of the questions we first asked today. You need to know kind of what's going on.
And platting and zoning are 2 different
Different
issues.
things, yeah.
We'll hit zoning
Okay.
next, but stay on the platting.
We're in the weeds.
All
So-
all you know from the
Plantings
plat
are all
is how
in.
big the lots are and maybe where the streets are, like you saw in that example.
Okay.
It doesn't tell you at all if it's gonna be apartments, houses, dentist, colony of dentist offices or something.
The sample plat that was put out here, quickly. Okay, that was 40 acres. It was platted. It's now that many individual lots. And it's those public rights of way, the alleys, the streets. Is there a drainage easement on those? If there was, it would be on there.
yeah, I was gonna get into that too.
Okay. So this whole is now that many separate pieces.
Okay.
So that's why when you bought your house, you bought lot X from block Y of such and such subdivision.
But he filed this and said R1 or R2, and that required then the zoning.
No, no.
Okay.
Keep the zoning out of it.
All right, good.
He took a solid piece of property that was one piece,
Right.
and he broke it into, if we counted those lots, he broke it into that many separate pieces. Still all under his ownership.
Okay.
Not zoned yet.
Okay.
It's coming.
I got it.
96 pieces.
Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you, it's just that we have to go to school twice. We gotta unlearn a whole bunch of stuff that we thought we knew. So that's why I'm having to ask these questions.
Well,
That's good for me.
More questions.
I didn't know anything.
That's good for us. Thank you.
And it's important, because when we're coming back with recommendations, I really do, I want you very comfortable with the terms you're hearing and stuff like that, so.
It's
more
helping.
questions, the better.
It's helping. Move on.
Okay,
It's helping.
so subdivision of land, 2 parts or more of a larger tract. If you do that, a plat is required. And that's inside the city and within the city's ETJ. A plat, once a plat's submitted to our department, we have 30, per state law, we have 30 days to act on that plat, period. If we don't act on it, if the planning and zoning, you've designated the planning and zoning commission your plat approving body. If they don't act on it within 30 days, then the plat's considered approved, and we basically have to put a stamp on it that said we didn't act within 30 days, and so it wasn't formally approved, but it's approved because we failed to act.
Legally, it's approved.
Right, and he can go down and file it himself, and it's a done deal. So that's the clock we're under once something is submitted.
So if a plat is incomplete and correct, it has to be denied within that period of time.
So if the streets aren't wide enough or something isn't fitting the rest, then you gotta stop.
If we've got issues and they're not solved by the time Planning and Zoning Commission is, we've got to deny it, and that's why currently, right now, we'd say we'll deny it, but we'll let you keep it on the agenda as a carryover until we get all this. But we'll get into that a lot more next Tuesday. A lot more. Things to think about though when you're talking about the subdivision process. If you know you're going to need a plat, you're inside the city or you're inside the ETJ, and you subdivide your property into 2 more parts, you're going to have to prepare a plat. Is the plat going to be in the ETJ? Because if it is, then there are several exemptions. If it's larger than 5 acres and doesn't require any extension of public improvements or anything like that, streets or anything like that, you don't have to plat it. And we also implement exceptions that are really deemed for county plats. That if you're transferring the property to a relative, which has to be a first generation, second generation relative, if you're giving your son some property, that doesn't have to be platted. There's a couple other exceptions for like governmental type entities, but if you meet some kind of exception, you don't have to plat, and there's many more exceptions in ETJ than there are inside the city. There are other requirements for the plat themselves. If you're going to have a water or septic system, it has to be at least an acre. So all your lots that you're platting, if you're expecting to get water and a well and septic system, has to be at least an acre, or you're not going to get it. And that's set by Texas TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Our environmental health department is the one who enforces that. We get a lot of people who have bought a piece of property that they don't have an acre and they're not able to get their well and septic permit. But
What's the philosophy behind that, especially septic?
well,
Interference.
I don't want your,
You do
you
it
got
right.
a water well.
Isolation.
You have
Yeah.
a drain field that has to be
You have to have enough
isolated and
space.
separated from your well cases.
You have to have the ability for a backup or a secondary septic system, because the life of the septic system, you have to have reserve field area.
not only do you have to have an acre lot, you have to be at least 100 feet apart. Minimum.
The septic systems have to be.
So any point of the drain field.
Gotcha.
If you take a square acre, set those points and draw your 100 all in one.
It's what?
Not a lot of
It can't be near waterway. Well, they also, we found out in
Right.
scouting, they gotta be a certain density of dirt.
So there are,
The house.
obviously, if you're inside the city and you have access to water and sewer, that's not a problem. So this is usually that's why there's an acre minimum for the ETJ. Also, we discern between urban and suburban subdivisions. In the ETJ, if you have a lot density that's less than 2 lots per acre, you're a suburban subdivision. And so certain standards apply to your subdivision. If it's an urban subdivision, which the definition of an urban subdivision is anything else. So if you have a lot density of less than 2 lots per acre, you're required to meet certain standards, like the lot size, minimum frontages. You have to have at least 150 feet of frontage on an arterial, access requirements. So certain development standards apply to your subdivision. If you're an urban subdivision, which is lot density of more than 2 lots per acre, then you're held to a different standard. You have to have, curb and gutter streets. You have to have streets. You have to, technically, you're going to be required to have alleys. you know, the
Sidewalks.
city type standards
standards.
will apply because you're an urban subdivision. So if you're in the ETJ, the main point here is your plat has to, your subdivision involves more than if you were a suburban subdivision.
Does the ETJ automatically expand with expansion and annexation?
Yes,
And it's a set distance?
5 miles. Anytime,
Based on population. Smaller towns have less ETJ. Bigger cities have
State that ours is 5 miles. For the
you have a
foreseeable
1
future.
mile, a 3 mile, and a 5 mile. And the 5 miles is the largest you can have, and we're in the 5 miles. But anytime we annex, it just pushes that out.
Gotcha.
If there's a, if you're platting in the city, the main things that we look at, what type of platting are you needing to do? There's different kinds of plats. There's a replat, which is a piece of property that's already been platted, or tracts that have already been platted, and they just want to reconfigure them. Maybe they want to make 5 lots into 3 lots, something like that. You can just do a replat. If it's a minor, or what we call a short form plat, which is 4 lots or less that doesn't need any improvements or anything like that, we've got a city staff member, right? It's Vicki. Vicki's office right now is the director of the community services. She can sign off on a plat if it's a minor or short form plat. Doesn't have to go through the planning and zoning commission meeting. So if somebody submits that kind of a plat, 1 lot, 2 lot thing that's on the street, as soon as it's got everything that it needs, it can be signed and filed, ready to go.
So the 3 new houses at Tesco's on Fairwood Boulevard,
That was a minor plat.
but it needed some city service, and you had to design a street in and out and restrict them from access. How did that work?
That plat, on that plat, it had a public, well, it has a private ingress-egress easement across all 3 of those lots.
Okay.
So it's not part of the public right-of-way, it's private, so they have to maintain it.
And that was that way when they got those lots.
Well, we required for them to be able to get the zoning and the plat to do that, we limited them to 1 access point.
But the owner changed the existing.
So he had to come back and get it
Match that.
Okay. Okay. Good.
But that was a minor plat that was signed off on, didn't have to go through Kansas approval. There's a major plat, which is more the typical type, large type developments. The plat example that you have in front of you, that's what we would call a major plat. That usually dedicates right-of-way, has alleys, those kinds of things. A lot of times requires extension of water and sewer. So those are the major subdivisions. So if you're inside the city, what kind of plat, what are you doing? What kind of plat do you need to do? Certain replats, if you're replatting residential zone property that was restricted by residential zoning, we have to send out notices for those replats to all the property owners within 200 feet. So there's a lot of detail and stuff, but I'm just trying to hit the big points. I don't want to confuse you too much now, but
later.
What triggered the big water drainage deal out here that was a concern? The city brought it up, so he platted this, and he brought it back, and we all of a sudden had to look back at a heavier drainage deal.
Let me look
Okay,
at this. Look at this plat down at the bottom right-hand corner of that sheet. This is an example of a pretty simple plat, but there are all kinds of issues that we as staff have to look at for this particular plat. Number one, where to start, this is a cul-de-sac. We don't allow a cul-de-sac to extend more than 1,000 feet because of emergency service type issues. If they get blocked or something, how do they get in somewhere else? They don't show any alleys on this plat. Where are the alleys? Are they going to do alleys? If they are, they're not shown. Do the streets line up? You see that court, the cul-de-sac, it lines right up with the street across from it, so we check that to make sure what the offsets are. We don't like close offsets of streets to where you have conflicts when people are trying to turn in the streets. We would look at, if you look on the very left edge you know, we would ask, well, here's where the lots end, but what is this? What's going on over here? Is this right-of-way that they're dedicating? Is that something that we need to think about here, or do we need right-of-way? Then what's this no man's land right here? They show it has a flag lot shape here, but still there's no technical access to that cul-de-sac. So if they're planning on that to be some kind of estate lot or something, I don't know, but they don't show any access to the right-of-way. So we would ask about that. They don't show anything in this area here or this area here. What if their drainage plan shows that they have water that drains into those areas? Well, do they have the necessary drainage easements that are going to be required? If they're not draining into the public right-of-way, are they draining onto private property? And what are those blank pieces? We require them to show adjacent property ownership and any improvements. If these were platted, they needed to show that those were platted. They just don't show blank pieces of space. So if, depending on where the drainage is, you know, there's all kinds of questions that we as staff look at by something as simple as this being turned in to look at, and we make sure that we ask the right questions and that we catch little pieces. Here's another little piece, this on the top of this cul-de-sac. I don't even know, is that common area or what is that? It's an undevelopable piece of property. So what is it and why is it there? So we ask questions like that.
It's a separate parcel. Who's going to end up owning it?
Who's going to take care of it? The street stuff out on the east side is interesting.
And that's another one. They show a dead-end street just right there on the bottom there. Where is that for another planned subdivision, or because typically we just don't allow dead-end streets? What's the plan for that? And there's a lot of questions that go into plat review. If somebody turns in a plat, we're under a 30-day clock. We have to get all these issues addressed, and what we do is we meet a staff, we make comments, we turn those comments back to the surveyors and developers, and we try to work all this out in 30 days.
Is this a real one, Mr. Chairman?
It's not here, but I just thought it showed a lot of different questions.
Now, let's say that you have, because you brought up a lot of questions just right here, this small. And let's say that you're nearing that 30-day drop dead date. Do you then just simply decline it or not approve it, rather than let it just sit idly by and be approved by the clock?
If we don't have all these issues addressed by planning and zoning, we deny it. And we allow it to be carried over until we get it all worked out.
They can't lock you
that's
out
what he said
there.
earlier.
That's right, So,
and if they are making the changes that Kelly and his staff might request, but don't get them back, you know, in sufficient time to really, you know, take a look at them, that would be another reason to deny it, but allow it to remain on the P&Z agenda so it carries forward with minimal delay, but you're still not getting stuck that you didn't get a chance to go through that.
We've acted on it. We denied it, but we're going to allow them to carry it over, and I have a statement that I dream about. I say it all the time that says, this plat is denied with stipulation that it can be resubmitted at a later date by the applicant with no additional cost. That's what happens when it's not ready and we have to deny it.
And plats like this show you the complexity of what does the plat look like for this other piece. They may be two different owners. One guy's getting his ready to go, one's not ready. But the plats have got to fit.
Is there a procedure or policy or whatever about how many times you can do that, roll it over? I mean, it seems to me if I submitted a plat and you kept rolling it over, I would be frustrated because those are dollars.
There is a process, and it's about a page. I think it's the next page. But also something that we need to think about when we see plats like this one here, it's dedicating right of way. So if it's dedicating right of way, currently we don't require plans, paving plans or utility plans to be submitted with the plat. But obviously something's going to have to, if they're planning on building a street, then that's going to be required at some point. So that's why you have this other bullet point down here for the paving or utility plans. If we see something like this, generally we will ask them, we'll have you turn in your plans to start the review process with our engineering department and utilities department.
So here's a neighbor out here that's not, maybe a different owner. How do you deal with that person to find out how it's going to affect his plans, like drainage and other things that are going to be?
Well, along with the plat, we require a drainage plan.
Gotcha.
And the drainage plan has to be submitted and approved before the plat gets approved. But that's the only plan that's like that.
Do you try and discern, do you have to discern what this neighbor's going to try and do to address that drainage issue, just so it fits his issue?
No, we just try to discern what this particular property owner is doing that's going to, and how it's going to impact the adjacent property.
But he can't drain under that guy's land
Without his permission.
without his permission.
Right.
So you are.
And that's when we say, if that's what your drainage plan shows, then you need to show us a drainage easement from that adjacent property.
Do all plans have to be signed off on by a professional land surveyor?
All plats did.
All plans do. So if you've got issues like this, you're not necessarily dealing with the developer, you're calling the land surveyor.
Where we consolidate all of our comments, we send out the plats to all the city departments, engineering, public works, utilities, fire department, all of the utility companies, and we ask for comments back. Planning department consolidates all those comments, and we send it to the surveyor or engineer, whoever prepared it, and the developer and property owner. They both get a set of those comments. We've had some issues there as well. We started acquiring that.
You get it all done in 30 days, having to do it that way?
Sometimes we do, a lot of times we don't.
But you're in conversation and they know why.
Right. I gave you an example of some construction plans, real simple little construction plans on a sheet. So sometimes when we talk to surveyors and private property owners, plans means plat to them. They get the plats and the plans confused. What do you mean? Well, we turned in a plan to who? Well, we brought up their planning department. Well, that's a plat. You know, that's not a plan. You need to submit a plat to us. You need to submit a drainage plan to engineering. And if you're going to have streets, you need to have paving plans. And if you have utilities, you need to have utility plans. And you submit those to utilities, and that gets reviewed in a separate process. So there's a difference between a plat and when you hear the word plans, that doesn't mean a plat. They're usually talking about some kind of construction plan. So I wanted to make that distinction.
Jared, when you talk about a one-stop shop to do this stuff, does that include like one place to go to turn in all those?
That's the ultimate goal. Now, what we've already done recently is we've designated a single point of contact, at least, as our developer liaison. It's our expert right here, Mr. Shaw. And that centralizes the communications from the developer in and from us out. As we're able to get the building redeveloped, we'll have that still, a couple of other changes, plus we'll physically have all these people in one place.
But even now, you're starting to see the why. Maybe that might be a good idea. If you have all these things that are required and are interrelated, and you have to go over here or down there or up there.
Wait for a response by email.
I mean, or if you could just maybe walk next door or something and say, well, can you come over here and talk? You know, it really sounds simple, but it really does make a difference.
And a change that's necessary to fit into one set of parameters may then cause an unintended issue with something else. So if it's not, these will start stacking up from the lowest sanitary sewer at the bottom all the way up till we get a street that's handling the drainage. If you start moving that stuff for good and valid reason, it may well require adjustments on the rest of it. Having that piece all at the same time, all in the same place, is going to be a huge benefit, certainly to the developers, but also to us.
Yeah.
So you're required to have a plat. Depending on what your plat is, you're required to have plans too associated with it. The current process that we have, I gave you our flow chart here, and I know that's hard to read. It was hard to squeeze on this slide, but I gave you in your example packet is a larger version, which you can read. But we do have a process that follows, where we always recommend a pre-application conference. That, you know, if you're going to submit, especially a large development like what you have in front of you as an example, we like for them to come in and talk to us about it so we can see what they're doing and maybe identify some issues that would be helpful to them in decreasing the time it takes. That rarely happens.
Rarely?
Rarely. And so the way our current process is set up, you can go straight to final plat. So if that's what you're going to do, then you go into the plat fee submittal. You submit your plat, then we have a staff review. Then we have 10 days, from submittal to get that out and comment. And once we provide those comments back, as soon as we get those comments back from the private side, then we then have 5 working days to get our comments back on if it's good or if we still have issues, that kind of thing. I think that maybe that's an area that we needed to have some improvement in. That if we have 10 days, let's use 10 days, not 4 weeks or something like that. So we're really focusing, or I'm trying to help right now focus on. We do have some timelines in our current process, so let's stick to those if we've got them in there. Once we get something back and it's ready to go, it then goes to the planning and zoning for consideration. Our process that we have set up right now, meeting every other week, we try to do all this in 22 days, not 30 days. We try to do it all in 22 days. And it's very difficult, to be real honest with you. It's really difficult. If it's a minor plat, you see that offshoot there, that doesn't even have to go to planning and zoning consideration. It can be approved just like the planning and zoning commission approves plats. Once something is approved, then we take that and we file it with the county. It's usually just a couple of days, and we do that. Once that plat is filed, we then have that, we have that public improvement part of it. Once you get your plat approved, then you're good to go with all the rest of your plans. The drainage plan needed to be approved, submitted and approved with the plat. Your paving plans, your utility plans, depending on if you're in the ETJ or in the city, you still have that part of the subdivision process that you need to, progress through. And we try to get the paving plans, again, trying to be timely. We try to ask that, okay, you're going to be needing paving plans and utility plans. Sure, we've got the plat going through the process, but why don't you go ahead and get those in, get those being reviewed, and get that going. But a lot of times they kind of get that in whenever they get it in. Sometimes it's before the plat's approved, many times it's after the plat's approved.
And the utility plans are only within the subdivision.
Correct.
So you may get to a time where they have these plans and they come to you and you say, look, the nearest source of water at a reasonable pressure is a half mile away. Is that happening? I mean,
if there's main extensions that are needed, that has to be addressed also. That we have participation on that. But mainly, and I know we're getting late, but mainly what I wanted to try to get to you today was just the big overview that anytime you subdivide property into 2 parts or more, you're required to do a plat. And that's required inside the city or outside the city unless you meet an exception. That plat is a graphical representation. It's not a plan. It's a plat that has to be done by a licensed surveyor. We have a process that it goes through. It's a very rigid, fast-track process. But then even after the plat is approved, you still have the obligation to do plans that have to be reviewed and approved. So we'll try to do our part as timely as possible. But the private side has to do their part also. And what we're going to be coming to you with here soon is maybe some variations in this process where I think it might work a little bit better and not be so disjointed the way it is now. We still need to adhere to our timelines, but right now you submit this to me, you submit that to engineering, you submit that to utilities. Comments go back and forth. Nobody's on the same clock. And those are the kind of changes that we're going to be coming to you soon, and which I'm going to kind of give you a heads up on next week.
Is this the 30 days from here up? And this is after you take it to the county, that stops the clock on the 30 days? 22 days, actually, from that line up. So you got 30 days to get all this stuff?
You have 30 days to get where you drew the line.
That's what that's
They're trying to do it within 22.
Yeah. Yeah, but you got 30 days here, and then it starts the end of that 10 years. Okay.
You know what it says? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to get us, we're going to have to break this. We'll pick up zoning next week. But we do have a topic that we really need to come back for after the meeting, closed session, and we'll do that as quickly as we can. Will you do that? Tell me, we'll go ahead and answer that.
No, next week, okay.
Sounds like you're gonna play time to ask a lot of questions. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, we need to.
If we could, with the proclamations, let's go in the order of the people that are climbing the Red Cross and then the root canal last.
The most painful thing last.
Yeah, I think my favorite's gonna go on.
Jim's gonna read the root canal. Usually that